I'm Tom Layson, and this is a Northwest Now Digital Extra. The coronavirus has exposed America's broken systems. One of them is childcare. For more on that, I spoke with Ryan Preca, who is the Washington State Advocacy Director for Childcare Aware. I want to start with a broad question. One of the interesting things about this pandemic is it has really exposed the cracks in the system. What has it exposed about the childcare system?
Well, you're absolutely right. Long before this pandemic came, the childcare system was in crisis, and we have a lot of information available to us that points that out. Families are paying more for childcare than tuition at state universities. Our childcare workers are paid less than parking lot attendants and pet groomers. And, our best estimate is that before the pandemic, we were probably serving around half of the demand for childcare, and that had a huge economic impact on our state. But since the pandemic set in, it's become demonstrably worse. Since February, about 24% of the programs that we had operating at that time, 24% of the total has closed down and is currently not open. We've lost over 30% of our total licensed capacity. Of course, our hope is that all of them come back and reopen as the economy continues to reopen. But we know because of the situation they were in before, where they were operating on razor thin margins, we're suffering from poverty and massive turnover, that a certain percentage of them are just never going to be able to reopen. And currently, right now, providers across the board, almost 40% of them, whether they're open or closed, are telling us that they're at real risk of permanently closing down in the short term.
Yeah, I read one study that KUOW did that indicated that about a quarter of the child care facilities in the state could close as a result of this. And of course, that number could go higher. But even if we take that number and say, okay, a quarter close, you're talking about 62,000 kids across the state of Washington, according to that study, which is incredible. That's a huge population.
Yeah, it's a massive number of kids that will have no place to go. And what I'm really worried about is the domino effect that will have. If those kids have no place to go, then their parents are unable to work and they fall farther and farther into poverty. And kids then start suffering severe trauma at a very critical time in their life. For the majority of kids who are under the age of 6, they spend the bulk of their brain development time in childcare programs, while over 90% of their brain develops before they ever set foot in a kindergarten classroom. And they rely on that high quality, stable environment in order to maximize that brain development. And when you take that away from a child, you take that routine and those relationships that they've built with those caregivers away, and you instead put them in a situation where their parents are dealing with unemployment and food insecurity and losing their housing, etc., and they don't have that caregiver to rely on for at least some normalcy in their life, then not only does their brains no longer develop, but actually traumatic experiences start settling in. And we know from the research that when that happens at that age, that can have effects for that child over their entire lifespan.
I'm listening between the lines here, and when you describe some of the socioeconomic problems that are commingled with this, my mind immediately goes to disadvantaged communities, minority communities. Is this landing harder on those communities than it is others?
Absolutely. And that was the case before the pandemic hit. Childcare is a system that is disproportionately operated and run by women, and disproportionately operated and run by women of color. I believe that's a big reason why this industry has never gotten the support that it needs from the public, related to other industries. And those vulnerabilities that were in the system are just getting amplified. I talk to providers every day, many of whom who are Black aging women, who realize that they are at severe risk of contracting the coronavirus and really struggling to recover from it, or maybe even die from it. And they have to weigh that risk with the needs of the families and the communities that they serve. And that's why I'm just so inspired by childcare providers, because just like any other frontline worker right now, they're putting their lives at risk. They're doing it despite the fact that a large percentage of them do not have access to health care. And if they do have any massive medical bills, they're really going to struggle to pay for that. They kind of put all that aside because they have a passion for this. They care about these kids, they care about these families, and they'll do whatever it takes to help them through this.
To see our full discussions about the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic, be sure to look in the Northwest Now digital section of kbtc.org. Northwest Now airs Friday nights at 7:30 right here on KBTC. And be sure to look for more digital stories like this one by following us on Facebook and Twitter at Northwest Now.